Name on the account was my mother-in-law's. The house fund my husband and I had been building for 7 years, $94,000, was gone. I remember staring at my phone in the parking lot of the grocery store. I'd just pulled up our joint savings to check if we had enough to cover the contractor's deposit for the new roof. The balance read $312.47. I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page 3 times. Then I sat very still and watched a woman push a cart past my car, her toddler reaching for a bag of chips, and I thought, this can't be real. It was real. Let me back up, because you're probably already asking why my mother-in-law had access to our savings account in the first place. It's a fair question. I asked myself the same thing sitting in that parking lot, except I already knew the answer. And the answer made me feel sick. My husband. I'll call him my husband because that's what he is, even now, even after everything. Grew up in a family where money was communal. That's how his mother put it. We keep things in the family. When we got engaged at 26, his parents threw us a dinner, and his mother presented us with a card. Inside was a handwritten note saying she'd added us to her family account network at her bank. She explained it as a safety net. If anything ever happened to us, car accident, medical emergency, anything, she'd have access to help. She said it with such warmth that I'd nodded along and signed the paperwork she slid across the table before I could think too hard about what I was agreeing to. That was 7 years ago. For 7 years, nothing happened. The account sat there. We added to it every month, sometimes a few hundred, sometimes more when we had a good year. My husband got a promotion 2 years ago and we started putting in $1,500 a month. We had a plan. We were going to buy a house before my 35th birthday. We had a spreadsheet. The $94,000 was not just money, it was 7 years of brown bag lunches and skipped vacations and saying no to things. We were building something. It was the nursery I'd already started painting in my head. It was the yard I wanted for our daughter. She's 4, her name is Poppy, and she doesn't understand any of this, thank God. I called my husband from the parking lot, he didn't pick up. I called again. Still nothing. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached, and I called the bank from the driveway. The representative was kind. She walked me through the transaction history in a calm, professional voice that made me want to scream. There had been a series of withdrawals over the previous 6 weeks, not one lump sum that would have triggered a fraud alert. Small enough to slip under the wire. $9,800 here. $8,500, $1,500 there. 11 transactions total. The last one had cleared 4 days earlier. All of them had been initiated by the secondary account holder, my mother-in-law. I sat in my car for a long time after I hung up. Then I called my sister. She answered on the second ring and I said, I need you to tell me I'm not crazy. She said, what happened? I told her. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said very carefully, have you called her yet? I hadn't. I couldn't. I was still in the phase where part of me believed there was an explanation, some mix-up, some emergency, something I was missing. Because the alternative was that the woman who had held Poppy in the hospital when she was 12 hours old had just stolen our life savings. And I wasn't ready to accept that yet. My husband finally called me back. He was in a meeting and stepped out into the hallway, and I could hear the echo of an office building behind him. I told him what I'd found. He went very quiet. That has to be a mistake, he said. 11 transactions, I said. 6 weeks. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I'll call her, he said. No, I said. I want to be there. We drove to his parents' house that evening after I dropped Poppy at my sister's. It's a 40-minute drive on the highway and we barely spoke. My husband kept saying he was sure there was an explanation. I kept nodding and looking out the window at the dark fields going past. His mother opened the door before we even rang the bell. She must have seen the headlights. She was smiling. That wide, practiced smile she wore for family occasions. And she said, this is a surprise. Come in, I just made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. His father came in from the living room, surprised to see us. And I looked at my mother-in-law across the table with her coffee mug and her smile. And I said quietly, "I need to ask you about the savings account." Her smile didn't waver. Not right away. My husband pulled up the transaction history on his phone and turned it toward her. "Mom, can you explain this?" She looked at the screen. She looked at it for a long time. And then she set down her mug and said, "I needed to handle something. I was going to put it back." I heard those words and something in me went very cold. I was going to put it back. $94,000, I said. Over 6 weeks, what did you need to handle? She glanced at my father-in-law. Something passed between them, a look I couldn't fully read, and then she straightened in her chair and said, "Your brother-in-law's restaurant, he was going to lose it. We needed to keep it afloat until the investors came through." Her other son, my husband's younger brother, had opened a restaurant 18 months earlier. It had been struggling. I knew that. Everyone in the family knew that. What I did not know was that the plan to save it had involved our daughter's future. "You used our house fund," my husband said, "to bail out his restaurant." "It's family," she said. Like that explained everything. Like that made it make sense. "That money was for our house," I said. "For Poppy." "You're young," she said. "You can save again." The restaurant would have closed. That's his livelihood, his dream. That was our daughter's future, I said. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Patient, almost pitying, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I was going to tell you," she said. "When the investors came through and I paid it back, you never even needed to know. I didn't want to stress you out." My husband pushed back from the table. He stood up and walked to the kitchen window and stood there with his back to us. I watched his shoulders. "When are the investors coming through?" I asked. She hesitated. "Mom," my husband said without turning around. "When? It's complicated," she said. I went home that night and I did not sleep. I lay on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling and made a list in my head. In the morning, I called a lawyer. I explained the situation. The account setup, the joint access, the withdrawals, the conversation. The lawyer was blunt in the way that good lawyers are. She told me that depending on how the account was structured, this could constitute financial fraud. She told me to get a paper trail together and to contact my bank's fraud department. She told me not to move any money or change any account structures until we'd spoken further. I spent that day pulling together 7 years of bank records. I printed everything. I put it in a folder. I felt like I was building a case against someone I used to trust, which is exactly what I was doing. The investors, as it turned out, were not coming through. The restaurant closed anyway 6 weeks after everything came to light. All of it gone, and our $94,000 with it. My father-in-law called us. He was the one who explained the full picture, the debt, the panic, the decision his wife had made without telling him. He sounded hollowed out. He said he hadn't known. I believed him, mostly because of the way he said it, like a man who had just learned something about his wife that he couldn't unlearn. My mother-in-law did not call. She sent a text to my husband saying she hoped we could all move past this as a family. We did not move past it as a family. We did not move past it as a family. Not quickly. The lawyer's advice was practical and grim. Because my mother-in-law had been a legitimate account holder, criminally proving intent was complicated. The more straightforward path was civil, suing for the return of the funds. Which meant taking my husband's mother to court, which meant asking my husband to take his mother to court. I want to be honest about this part, because I think it's the part people don't talk about enough. There is a version of the story where I'm the villain, where I push too hard, where I chose money over family, where I caused a rift that didn't need to exist. I know that version. I heard pieces of it from my brother-in-law, who called me one afternoon and told me his mother was devastated and that there were other ways to handle this. I asked him what other way he had in mind for recovering $94,000. He didn't have an answer for that. What I kept coming back to was Poppy. 4 years old, watching her shows on the couch, not knowing that the house she was going to grow up in had just been dismantled while she slept. She didn't get a vote. She never gets a vote when adults make decisions that affect her. That has always felt profoundly unfair to me, and it felt especially unfair then. My husband took a long time to come around. I want to be fair to him too, because he was caught between his wife and his mother, and there's no good way to stand in that place. He spent about 2 weeks trying to find a middle path, some arrangement where his mother paid us back gradually, quietly, no lawyers, no courts. His mother agreed to this in principle and then made one payment of $500 and went silent. After that, my husband called the lawyer himself. The day we filed was a Tuesday. It was raining. I drove Poppy to preschool and watched her run inside with her backpack bouncing, and I sat in the car and cried for about 10 minutes, not from sadness exactly, more from the specific exhaustion of having to do something you never wanted to do, but that became necessary anyway. The case moves slowly. These things do. There were letters and counter-letters, and a period where my mother-in-law's attorney suggested we had misunderstood the nature of the account agreement, which was an interesting argument given that she had never mentioned her plan to us beforehand and had explicitly said she intended to put the money back without our knowledge. My father-in-law started calling my husband more regularly during this time. They had quiet conversations I wasn't part of. I didn't ask about them. I trusted my husband to tell me what I needed to know, and he did. His father was, it seemed, trying to hold something together. His marriage, his relationship with his son, his own understanding of what had happened. I felt for him. I genuinely did. There was one evening, about 4 months into everything, when my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced. Poppy answered the door because she'd been playing in the hallway and got there first. And she threw her arms around her grandmother's legs the way 4-year-olds do. And my mother-in-law picked her up and held her. And I stood in the doorway to the kitchen and watched. I did not ask her to leave. I let her sit on the floor with Poppy and play with her blocks. I brought her a glass of water. We did not talk about the money. We did not talk about the lawsuit. We talked about Poppy's preschool and the show she was obsessed with and the fact that she had lost her first tooth. When my mother-in-law left that evening, she hugged me at the door. I let her. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. I don't know what that moment meant. I've turned it over a lot since then. The settlement came 11 months after we filed, not the full amount, $74,000, structured as payments over 3 years, with the first payment up front. The lawyer told us it was a reasonable outcome given the circumstances. I sat with that word for a while, reasonable. It didn't feel reasonable. But I also understood that legal processes rarely produce the outcome you think you deserve. They produce the outcome the evidence supports, and that's different. We bought the house, a smaller one than we'd originally planned. 3 bedrooms instead of 4, a yard that needs work, a kitchen with cabinets that don't quite close right. Poppy has a bedroom with a window that looks out at a maple tree, and in the fall the leaves turn this deep red orange that she thinks is the most incredible thing she's ever seen. She stands at the window every morning and narrates it to me like a nature documentary. I do not have a tidy way to end this. I wish I did. My relationship with my mother-in-law is not what it was. It is not nothing either. She comes to Poppy's birthday. She brings thoughtful gifts. She and I are careful with each other in the way that people are careful when they know exactly how much damage is possible. My husband and his mother talk. I don't begrudge him that. She is still his mother. What I know is this. I protected my daughter. I didn't do it loudly. I didn't make a scene. I got a lawyer. I got a paper trail. I sat across from people who tried to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable, and I stayed steady. Not because I'm strong in some cinematic way, because Poppy was going to stand at that window someday, watching the leaves turn, and I had decided that was worth fighting for. The account is closed now. There is no secondary holder. There will never be one again, and the maple tree is beautiful.